Good day and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing a ghost town out of Alaska whose abandonment may have been caused by gruesome and mysterious circumstances. Before we get started on the fun stuff, we're going to discuss a little bit of the history of Portlock. It's located on the lower end of the Kenai Peninsula, and back in the 1700s, people started settling and living in the area, and they referred to the area as Port Chatham because it wasn't really a town yet. Population mostly consisted of Russians and a variety of different Native Americans who all worked anywhere between being fishers, loggers, miners, the things you'd typically find in small town, secluded Alaskan wilderness. And eventually, all their hard work and generations sticking around paid off because by the early 1900s, the town became a proper town and took on the name of Portlock, being counted on census data so they can have their proper representation. And they got their own post office. The town apparently got their name from a British ship captain named Nathaniel Portlock, who visited somewhere in the area of Port Chatham in the late 1700s. Why did they decide to choose his name for the town name? I'm not quite sure. That might just be a legend that they tell. The town did need an official name. I think Port Chatham was more an area, but I guess they could have also taken Port Chatham as the name. I don't know. Anyway, back to the town itself. The town's economy became more focused on the fishing, and you even had a large commercial fishing company move in, set up with all their ships, hire a bunch of the locals for workers, and then they also ended up opening a cannery. Things were looking up for the town. It was just continuing to grow, and everything was grand. However, by the 1950s, everyone was gone. Why? That's exactly what we're going to discuss next. So, what would have caused a bunch of people to abandon their homes and jobs? At the core of everything, a period of strange sightings, complete with gruesome deaths and mysterious disappearances, with everything seemingly tied to Bigfoot, or I guess more specifically a regional legend called a Nantinnuk, which appears to also share similarities to another regional legend called a Nanina, that one specifically meaning people stealer. It's a little bit hard to figure out exactly what potential regional legend, or I guess maybe Bigfoot subspecies, is responsible here, just because there are so many different native groups with their own languages and their own legends and stories, and a lot of them also seem to intertwine. Anyway, this Bigfoot like creature was reportedly sighted multiple times in the area. This includes when a man named Tom was out working at a sawmill and he spotted a large hairy creature down by the beach. Naturally, he went home and got his gun, because, of course, classic move shoot what you fear. He then went back out to the beach and locked eyes with the creature. And through their shared gaze, an understanding was reached. He lowered his gun and he let the creature walk off. Probably because while he was looking at that thing, he thought to himself, either I kill it or it kills me, and I'm not sure my gun's going to work. In another instance, hunters were tracking a moose in the wilderness until they stumbled upon something strange that seemed to also be following the moose tracks. Bare human footprints measuring about 18 inches in length. They were a little puzzled by this because, unless someone like, say, Shaq is out in the woods hunting moose, something else is probably out there with them. Naturally, they followed the trail until they came upon a large area of grass and brush that seemingly was flattened out. They came to the conclusion that whatever made these footprints probably got the moose and killed it and took it off into some hills. They came to this conclusion because they stopped seeing the moose tracks, but they still saw the large bare footprints. At this point, they made the smart decision to go home. However, the same can't be said for another group of hunters, who, as the story goes, went up into the mountains to hunt and never came back, with their bodies eventually floating down a river, all mutilated and disfigured. Well, depending on the story, it's one of the hunters or several of the hunters. Sometimes it's, full on bodies, several body parts, and at that point, it's kind of hard to tell how many people really. Did incidents like this stop people from going out into the woods? Nope. Another story involves a gold miner who went out to his area where he was mining in the woods and also not coming back. Nobody knew where to exactly look for him, obviously, because he said he struck gold, so he wasn't going to share that information. Was it Bigfoot killing him or was it somebody else killing him for his gold? We'll never know. And then you have one of the more interesting ones, at least for me. A man named Andrew, who was a logger, was found dead at his job site, with people reporting that he suffered a blow to the back of his head that killed him instantly, with stories just saying there was a blow to his head from something, or saying that logging equipment, very heavy logging equipment that one person couldn't lift and throw, struck him in the head and killed him. With all that going on, it's no wonder why people started leaving and not coming back. And with the population dwindling more and more, it kind of, for the remaining residents, it didn't feel any safer. You can't really go out hunting, you can't really go out mining or logging. A lot of forms of income really getting removed to just being whittled down to fishing. Kind of need a lot more than that just to get a town functioning and growing. Now comes the part where we talk about what really was going on. And you'll be surprised to learn that the very real reason why everybody left was quite boring. You see, after the construction of State Highway Alaska Route 1 in the late 1940s, people began leaving Portlock to live in towns and villages closer to the new highway and right off the new highway, as it offered better employment opportunities, economic growth, and you now had a whole major roadway that led to hospitals, other areas you might want to get to. It made getting stuff a lot easier. It made getting your own stuff out a lot easier. The people who lived at Portlock had to rely on everything coming to them and taking everything by boat. But now you had a major roadway that even went to Anchorage, for example. And of course, as people started to leave for the better, and less people remained, more and more people felt incentivized to leave. The town was becoming less productive, the economy was slowing down, certain jobs were gone, especially if certain larger industries were leaving. So eventually, by the 1950s, there was really only one person left in town, and that was somebody running the post office up until that closed as well. But then what about all the Bigfoot stuff and the deaths and the disappearances? Well, it's possible that the Bigfoot sightings themselves were misidentifications of bears. It's Alaska. They got grizzlies, Kodiaks. They're kind of everywhere. People get used to them. They can be very large. They can even stand up on their feet. And sometimes at certain distances, it could probably make you think you're seeing something you're not. And come on, eyewitnesses are notoriously bad at properly processing what they see, especially if they get a little scared or freaked out. Something we've talked about before. Especially if you're looking at Tom, for example, the guy working at a sawmill who saw something large and hairy on the beach. I mean, the dude ran to get his gun, so he was clearly scared, and scared enough to also not shoot after the fact. And then you have things like the Bigfoot tracks that those alleged moose hunters found. A lot of the times I've seen that deformed or misshaped bear tracks in dirt or mud that have been altered by weather can sometimes appear to be human tracks. This is something that Bigfoot researchers a lot of the times have examined and been able to disprove. And it makes more sense that a grizzly was probably tracking a moose along with those hunters, and that large area of flattened grass was either the moose had stopped there to rest or the bear had stopped there to rest before the hunters ever reached the area. And as for the moose tracks disappearing and the bear tracks still continuing, I guess the potential bear tracks, it's possible that they just lost the tracks of the moose and were more focused on what looked like human tracks. Some like to point that a lot of the Native Americans have legends of certain monsters, large hairy monsters in the woods. And honestly, in my time reading about a lot of different legends from a lot of different cultures, these types of legends tend to exist to keep people either from going off into the woods alone or going near water systems, for example. And yeah, largely they're designed to just kind of stop, especially children, from going off to places they shouldn't be alone. Some of you may be wondering if these kinds of disappearances and deaths were happening, there would be newspaper stories about it, especially if a bunch of hunters disappeared and then their body parts came floating down the river. Newspaper stuff was checked for the area as far back as the 1700s to after the town was abandoned, and you'd be surprised to hear that there was no news of any of the previously stated mysteries, sightings, or deaths. In fact, a lot of the story might be stitched together from other stories. And it's also possible that the newspaper that originally reported a lot of this stuff in the 1970s, the Anchorage Daily News, may have embellished a lot of stuff or even made up some of the stuff just to sell newspapers. At that time, before there was the internet and information was, I guess, less readily available, people were just getting their stuff through the newspapers, and to help sell newspapers, sometimes you just had to make stuff up. However, something that is very real that would have happened out in the Alaskan wilderness in these small towns would have been accidents from fishing, from logging, from mining. All of these things can happen. The gentleman that we discussed, Andrew, that was apparently found dead and potentially struck by logging equipment, that kind of stuff happened all the time. People were getting injured. It's entirely possible he was doing some work and something got loose and hit him. Maybe a log, maybe some of the machinery, maybe something swung. Maybe he even tripped and fell. The details for the story aren't really there. We don't know if, say, an impact spot was found on a piece of equipment or if blood somewhere found kind of indicated. It was just more like he suffered a head injury, killed instantly. It's as if something threw logging equipment at him, but it's like, there's nothing really pointing you in the direction of where they would have gotten that information. There you have it. Portlock's another one of those classic spooky stories, but at the end of the day, there's no real evidence or substance to back up any of the spookiness. Just people leaving for better opportunities. Thanks for watching. The next one, I don't remember what's on the docket, but I'm sure it's going to be fun. And will hopefully be out by the towards the end of the month, and not another 4 months later. Trying to get stuff together, and also life. But anyway, until next time, see ya.